What are your feelings about Project Blue Beam? I know we've heard about that in the past. Okay, the difference between denying extraterrestrial life and fabricating extraterrestrial life. Both involve the government.
I believe they have captured certain technology or spacecraft like the one that went down in Roswell, New Mexico, which they got, a couple of live aliens out of that, kept them alive for some time.
So you believe that was a real thing, that wasn't a weather balloon?
Oh, no, that was no weather balloon. That was a cover story. No. I think we've seen a massive invasion of UFOs that a lot of people are calling drones. Now, that isn't to say, because there are Chinese drones running around the country, a lot of them with these Chinese young people that are being admitted by illegal aliens into the country. And I think they're trained in drones. They've been buying drones and then flying them around Andrews Air Force Base and other Air Force Base to photograph those things and doing espionage.
About the extraterrestrials not being nice or being, a lot of people think they're demonic.
Well, there is something to that in the fact that, first of all, they don't operate on Newtonian physics. These alien spaceship going up and then one of them diving down into the ocean. In fact, there are now lighted videos of certain what they're calling drones that descend in the ocean. It's probably about half a dozen of them lined up vertically, and they descend into the ocean. Well, drones don't descend into the ocean.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the almost greatest show on earth, I would say. That's like the oldest phrase in the book. I think it goes back before Barnum and Bailey or whatever. Anyway, welcome Joel Skousen back once again. It's been a few months because he was running for president of the United States of America. Was that the first time you did that?
Yes, it is. I did so because the Constitution Party asked me to run.
How was that? How was your experience, just briefly?
Well, it wasn't that good, really. I only accepted the invitation because I thought that it would give me an opportunity to have a broader audience outside of my World Affairs Brief paywall, which is a modest subscription fee for it.
That's right.
But it turns out that almost it was hard to get beyond without a lot of money to advertise. It's very difficult to reach people outside of the small constitutional conservative circles. And you get Constitution Party members to invite people, and you get 30, 40 people out, and they're already members of the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to reach new people is almost impossible without millions of dollars in advertising budget.
Right.
So that isn't possible in small third parties because big money donors, they want to only donate money to people who have the potential of winning. And so it's kind of a catch-22. How can you win if you don't get donations? And how you get donations if you can't give them a path to victory?
Right. And there's different reasons that people run for president of the United States. I mean, you knew in your mind that you weren't going to win, probably.
That's right.
It was inevitable. But there are other reasons people run for president. And sometimes it's just to get wake people up and make them aware of certain things.
Well, and that was my cause. I did not take the normal stance of a Constitution Party candidate, which would be to promote the Constitution and returning to the Constitution, because as a scholar of the Constitution, it's my opinion that it's impossible to return to it because we're ruled by case law nowadays instead of the Constitution's language. In other words, every lawyer says, what do we need to restore the Constitution? We use it every day. No, you really don't. You use case law. You use legal interpretation of the Constitution, not the actual intent of the founding fathers.
Yeah.
So, but that's not an issue that's of interest in most people. People are interested in their benefits and what government can do for them. We've become a benefit majority. In the United States, over 50% of people are in some way receiving a government check every month.
That's true.
Or pension. And so My campaign was based upon my being the top national expert in the history of the deep state. In other words, I could promise people, at least I could tell who was deep state and who isn't, which Donald Trump couldn't. My message was meant to conservatives. And you have to be an expert in conspiracy to know who's been involved in deep state, because it's only through tracking the cover-ups, the government cover-ups of the JFK assassination or the 9/11 or any of those major conspiracies, or even the COVID-19 fiasco. You got to know who was involved in covering up for the dangerous vaccines, et cetera, to know who's part of the deep state and who isn't. And Trump has never studied conspiracy. He was never a conservative before he ran. Is a good populist. He understands in general what it takes to make America great. But my message was he's not going to be able to drain the swamp because he doesn't know conspiracy. And I was hoping, that other mainstream or other people would pick up on that here's a unique point of view and we ought to interview this guy. And that didn't happen. I even was in contact with Robert F. Kennedy III, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s son. And because he emailed me and said, "Hey, I heard your interview about where you talked about the phony fall of the Soviet Union. And I'd like to know what's the backup for that." Because I'm one of the unique journalists who have called them on that they faked their own demise rather than truly became a free society.
Yeah.
So I gave him the information, didn't hear back from him, and wrote to him. And apparently his wife, who's a flaming liberal, who was the campaign manager for RFK Jr., didn't like it, and so it went nowhere. So, but this was basically the entire thing. All my attempts to basically get interest in the unique knowledge that I had failed. And I look upon it in retrospect with the fact that, I think the Lord is determined that because of the increasing growth and wickedness, gay and lesbian outgrowth in the United States, that we've lost the blessings of protection. He's not going to bless us trying to restore liberty in the country, that we're going to go through the consequences. And those consequences, I'm predicted during my campaign, is going to be World War III, probably before the end of this decade with Russia and China.
Yeah.
So it's not a popular message. It's not a message of rah hope. Let's just get behind the Constitution and we'll be free again. No, it's not going to happen.
Well, you brought up some good points. I think people have hope. They want to have hope in it because you mentioned Trump being a populist. And I know that we're here to talk about some other things, and I'll get to that right in just a second. But you did bring up a good point. I'm never fanboyed over Trump. I did vote for him twice, and because who else am I gonna vote for?
Right.
and I like some things about him, but there is factual evidence. There's evidence that people in his administration, back when he was Trump, President 45, like Nikki Haley and others, that he realized, oh, these are globalists. They're not, or these are rhinos amongst me. And he didn't have someone there to inform him, which shows his, would you say that shows, well, you already said it, his naivete, somewhat, but a good guy that wants the best for a country? Or is he a populist that, hey, I'm getting a lot of pats on my back and attaboys, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing?
Well, I don't think he's a controlled entity like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris was. A lot of conservatives think he is, but I find no evidence. He's simply easily manipulated. I mean, you flatter Donald Trump, and he's putty in your hands. Just like Xi Jinping came away from his Mar-a-Lago meeting, or Trump came away from it saying Xi Jinping's a great guy, and even still invited him to his inauguration, thinking he's a good guy. And he came away from Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, thinking he's my pen pal. We're great buddies, he said. Well, that just shows extreme naivete about the evil in this world and about existential enemies that are building with weapons of mass destruction to eventually strike us. And it's unfortunate, as I've talked about even on your show before, the conservatives have bought into the notion that Putin is a Christian, that he's anti-woke, and that he's trying to take down our new world order and make us free. And that's just the height of idiocy. They fake their own demise. He put the Russian people into the borders of Ukraine so that they could have an excuse to invade again. He's not a good guy. He's going after the Baltics. They put hundreds of thousands of Russians into the Baltic states. They would be next after Ukraine in terms of invasion. So conservatives have to wake up and be much, much smarter about conspiratory fact and theory, especially about 9/11 being a deep state operation from beginning to end.
Well, and Vladimir being a Christian, I mean, the Soviet Union had the Russian Orthodox Church there just as much as it is there now. It's kind of like the mafia respecting the Catholic Church, you know, the Godfather respecting the Pope.
Well, the Soviets had put communist agents all through the Orthodox Church, and that's why the Russian Orthodox Church never protested any of the purges of Stalin. Not a single protest during the entire Soviet years.
Oh, no.
So it's not a sign that he's a Christian because he's helping to build up the Orthodox Church. And the Orthodox Church in Ukraine is also pro-Russian as well, because it's still communist. The same communist leaders are still in charge of the Orthodox Church there. So you see, Christians have to look past the superficial signs that a person is Christian or woke. I mean, true Christians don't bomb innocent civilians in cities all through Ukraine. True Christians don't take Ukrainian children out of that they capture and put them into indoctrination camps. And they don't make colonels in the KGB out of Christians, period. You know, people have to look beyond the obvious and see the logical contradictions to these assumptions that Putin's a nice person.
Yeah. And you've never, you know, and I want to make it clear, you've never said that the globalist agenda is any better, but you have two evil entities. We have to remember these are
three. We have three predator centers in the world: Russia, China, and our own Western globalists. And they're all satanic controlled. He's promising all of them that they're going to win. But of course, obviously, he doesn't let that happen. He promised Hitler he was going to rule the world.
Right.
Betrayed him at the end in order to build up the Soviets as the replacement to Hitler. And so this is a very sophisticated thing, and it's very, very evil. And Satan is at the root of all those things.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to drones. Drones, everywhere drones. What's going on here? Before I forget, brothers and sisters, if you are enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ding the bell for notifications. Your support means the world to me and helps the channel grow. And hey, if you want to contribute to the program, I do prefer Venmo first, then Cash App, then PayPal, then Zelle. And I've got cool products. I got cool merch. That's all being designed. I get a percentage of it. And that's if you're interested. Remember, your comments are what keep this community thriving. So drop your thoughts below. And if you're feeling extra generous, consider becoming a YouTube member or sending a thanks, a super thanks right there. The button's right below the screen during our videos. Now back to the topic.
Well, the biggest problem, and I'm covering this in tomorrow's issue of the World Affairs Brief, the ongoing frenzy and the horrible speculation that's going on. And problem number one is that people are calling everything unknown out there a drone now, because everyone's saying, well, there's a swarm of drones. So they almost, anything I can't read must be one of these drones. And that's just a height of stupidity. I mean, I have looked at all the videos being posted around the internet about these so-called drones. Some of them are airliners. Some of them are even Southwest Airlines with a light shining on the tail. You know, that's not a drone. In fact, and some of them are helicopters. And in the nighttime, when you see a red anti-collision light and a white strobe and a green and red on the left and right-hand side of the aircraft, those are FAA requirements, and enemy drones don't put on anti-collision lights onto their drones. In fact, most hobby drones don't have any lights on them at all. And so what they're seeing at night oftentimes are regular manned aircraft in some sort. And they could be unmanned large aircraft like Reaper drones, military drones. Those are the size of airplanes. And those are easily distinguished. But there's another problem here is that there has been a massive onslaught of what we used to call UFOs that are now called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena,
Mm-hmm.
that these are not drones. But anytime someone sees a light in the sky, and I've seen certain videos where you see kind of a green light in the sky, or two or three of them, and all of a sudden they start to swirl. These are 20 miles away, and they start to move across the screen rapidly. And so they come up with oh, these are hypersonic drones. No, no, no. There's no such thing as a hypersonic drone. Drones are multiple propeller, or they can be a drone aircraft.
Right, right.
But when you get to a hypersonic speed, it's a missile. It's not a drone. This just shows the ignorance of people in terms of terminology. You can't have a hypersonic drone. You can only have a hypersonic guided missile that goes. And let me tell you that these UFOs that have been reported by pilots, and last week in the World Affairs Brief, I had a video composite of all of the airliners, pilots talking with Seattle Center in the western part of the United States about these UFOs that they were seeing. And we're talking about, things up at 50,000 feet that drop down to 30,000 feet almost instantly. No even hypersonic missile can go that fast. And when you see something that's 20 or 30 miles away that's moving across your screen like that, that's beyond hypersonic speed. If you even see a rocket going into space, it is going very slowly when
Right.
it's 100 miles away. But when it's something that's going like that, that's beyond hypersonic. That is extraterrestrial. And that's an important thing for people to understand, that they're confusing a lot of what they're seeing, calling drones that are what we used to call UFOs, because they are. Let me tell you a couple of the indicators that these are extraterrestrial, not man-made. One, there have been several drone operators that have flown their own personal drones up to get a closer picture of some of these drones that they've seen, and found that their batteries were depleted, that the drone fell out of the sky, wasn't physically attacked or anything. But let me tell you, there is no technology that we possess on Earth that can deplete a battery, a mile or two away from anything that's doing it. There's just no technology for that. Extraterrestrials, yeah, you can do that. There are pictures of drones emanating laser beams onto the ground, but there's no reports of any damage. If this was a foreign adversary attacking something, you would obviously have reports, well, something was burned up because of a laser beam, There's nothing out there. Now, what those laser beams, and there are videos showing the lasers emitting from some of these drones or aircraft, because they're too far away, first of all, to really determine exactly what they are. So when government is saying, well, we don't know what they are, but we can assure you that they're not a foreign adversary and that they pose no threat. Now, that's a contradiction of terms.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Trump said, are we to believe the government doesn't know what's going on? I don't think so, he says. And if we don't know what it is, we need to shoot them down. Well, that's really stupid. If you can't see or determine or ID something, doesn't mean you can go shoot them down. And even DHS Secretary Mayorkas said, we have the federal authority to shoot down these things. Well, you do and you don't. The point is, you end up shooting down an airliner, and there's gonna be hell to pay, or even a private helicopter. But the point I want to make is that let's take this statement, this assumption that government has to know everything. We're used to the fact that government has a surveillance state, and they know everything that we're saying. They know what we're conversing on electronically. They know what's on our phones. They know what's in our emails. They are surveilling all of that. But let me tell you, that's just very easy science. You simply tap into all the electronic things and you can record anything. That's easy, but radar is not easy. And radar is nowhere near as precise. People think government's got radar out there and they can see every drone in the sky, and that's just not true. There's something about radar cross-section that depends. Well, first of all, no matter what is seen or reflects back from radar, which is a radio wave that made it out there and it comes back, it comes up as a light spot, a blip on a radar screen. That's all radar tells it. It doesn't tell you the shape of it. It doesn't tell you how big it is, other than the fact that blip. It depends on the distance too. You take an airliner, for example, that has a radar section of several hundred square meters, and you put out 50 miles away, and you may not be able to see it at all.
Right.
At 50 miles, it has a radar cross section of a few inches. Now you see the problem. A drone, especially since it's made out of carbon fiber plastic, which radar cannot generally see and doesn't reflect radar. In fact, they use carbon fiber in a lot of stealth technology on fighter aircraft now. But you reduce that radar cross section to just, half a meter. And you may be able to see that if it's, 10 feet away from the radar screen or the radar emitter, but you get that thing, 50 miles away and you can't see a thing. And so that's the point. People are assuming government's got to know this stuff. They've got to know what's going on. Well, let's say that they could even see them. Well, runway radar transmitter may have a scan that goes out 100 miles. But if that drone appeared from as they said, an Iranian mothership that was outside that, you wouldn't know where it came from. You just know it suddenly appears on your screen from some general direction. And then it goes off the screen. You don't know where it's going. So how do you trace it? So while I'm sympathetic to the fact that government doesn't know, in fact, what a lot of these, because they can't see most of them, they can see all the things that have transponders on them. Now, transponders are radar return equipment. I have one on my airplane. When a radar beam hits the antenna, it emits a return signal and tells the radar who I am, what my tail number is, who the owner is, and where I'm going, and what my altitude is. That's a transponder. And in the military, we have IFF, which is identification friend or foe. It's a much more sophisticated thing, which helps you identify exactly what squadron you're from and where you're from, so that you don't get shot down in a very congested military environment. But none of these drones have transponders or IFF. So the government's supposed to see these things with just raw radar, which is a tiny little blip. Now, the government does have certain radar that can do it, but these are right at military installations. They're a close range radar that works within a quarter to a half a mile, so they can see all the drones around there. But we don't have those installed at most bases. They're starting to install them now. Trump offered them to send them up to New York to help Governor Hochul on these things. But these are very localized. I mean, to see these little tiny drones that are maybe this big, you need a radar that's within a couple hundred yards from them, you see, or even a half a mile. So you see how complex this thing is and how stupid it is for people saying, oh, drones are everywhere. I mean, as an expert, I can tell you, they don't know what they're talking about when they're calling everything in the night sky a drone.
So how did this get circulating? I mean, was it the media that kind of caused this frenzy, or are we talking podcasters, YouTubers?
No, it was people calling into the police. And I think there was an increase in a couple of things. Here's a couple of the theories. One, that there are drones out there searching for missing nukes. And this is just really stupid conspiracy stuff. One of those things was a missing shipment of selenium, radioactive selenium, which is used for medical purposes. Well, in the first place, none of our aircraft have nuclear sniffing equipment on them that can tell that, let alone drones. And it's very difficult. These things are enclosed radiation-proof containers. They're not leaking radiation that you can detect from a drone flying over.
Right.
They talk about nukes that were dismantled from Ukraine that went missing. And, this is just so many bogus conspiracy theories that are coming out. There's also the fact that NASA had a corridor that covered this New Jersey area where they were doing some experimental drone flying and things. Well, come to find out that was terminated in the fall, terminated in October, took place in, so it wasn't happening during this time. Now, I think there may have been some drones, and they may have been Chinese drones, because they have been very notable in terms of overflying military bases. But look at the Picatinny arsenal that claims that there have been drones flying over them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything's under a roof in there. What's a drone going to see flying over Picatinny arsenal? Nothing. There's nothing for them to see. What are they going to see flying over Trump's golf course? Nothing. You know, I don't know the answers to those things in terms of whether they're hobby drones or what they are, because remember, these don't have any identification, and long distance radar cannot tell where they're taking off from or where they're going, period. And so government is right. They're not there. The main reason the government is saying there's no threat is, number one, they're in the habit of denying UFOs. They've always said UFOs are no threat. And frankly, there have been no damage from UFOs to any. They've never attacked the United States. And theologically, I think that has to do with the fact that there is life and different forms of life. We aren't the only species in the universe, but we're part of God's kingdom, and we voluntarily agreed we like how human beings look, and that's what we wanted to be a part of. But there's no rule in the universe that says that somebody else, being intelligent particles, can't organize their own type of competing universe and say, we're going to design beings that look like silver skinned, aliens that we see
Right.
depicted in the movies.
Playing on human beings' imagination. So,
but theologically, there is no scriptural evidence that indicates that God has a lock on everything in the universe, because we know that the universe goes on forever and that intelligence matter is neither created nor made, meaning that it's all just waiting to be organized. So there's a lot of organized matter up there. And even though God has organized more earths than the sands of the sea, that still doesn't account for anywhere near what's available in the universe. So I think the evidence is very strong that there is extraterrestrial life. They have been visiting, but for some reason, God has warned them, you're not to interfere with this earth life. They've come to observe, and they're particularly interested in military technology like nuclear technology, but they haven't interfered as far as what I've seen.
So there's several things going on here. I would love to pick your brain another time, Joel, because you just got me started, but we can't. Speaking about extraterrestrials, what are your feelings? I'm going to shift, but I'm not going to shift completely off the topic. What are your feelings about Project Blue Beam? I know we've heard about that in the past. The difference between denying extraterrestrial life and fabricating extraterrestrial life. Both involve the government. What say you?
Well, I think Project Blue Beam is a cover story, to excuse, the government from admitting to extraterrestrial life. They have attempted and they have captured several of these spacecraft that have crashed. A lot of people on the internet claim that they've been able to take that technology, and we now have anti-gravity technology. I don't believe that. I believe they have captured certain technology or spacecraft like the one that went down in Roswell, New Mexico, which they got, a couple of live aliens out of that, kept them alive for some time.
So you believe that was a real thing, that wasn't a weather balloon? And
oh no, that was no weather balloon. That was a cover story. No. There were some, amateurish videos that they took, and a lot of that's out there on the internet. And I think it's legitimate.
That one where the aliens gasping for breath. You've seen that one?
Yeah. But in any case, the government has made a considerable attempt to cover this up. And that's part about the innate paranoia of having a conspiratorial government, a deep state government. They're just afraid of everything, letting it out. So they tend to stamp secret on everything, which is really unfortunate, especially about the UFO phenomenon. But it's come out full blown now that the Navy pilots, have captured on their scope, and these alien spaceship going up, and then one of them diving down into the ocean. In fact, there are now lighted videos of certain what they're calling drones that descend in the ocean. It's probably about half a dozen of them lined up vertically, and they descend into the ocean. Well, drones don't descend into the ocean, and they don't, from that distance, emit that kind of light. That's beyond the battery capacity. of drones to, from 30 and 40 miles away to live this huge beam of light coming out, and then to have that light keep going as it goes down in the ocean. But extraterrestrial craft can do all of that type of thing. And so I think we've seen a massive invasion of UFOs that a lot of people are calling drones. Now, that isn't to say, because there are Chinese drones running around the country, a lot of them with these Chinese young people that are being admitted by illegal aliens into the country. And I think they're trained in drones. They've been buying drones and then flying them around Andrews Air Force Base and other Air Force Base to photograph those things and doing espionage.
Well, and aren't they using drone warfare in the Ukraine-Russia thing too?
Oh, yes, but that's a totally different type. I mean, that's a very simple, cheap type drone that is able to drop a grenade, and that's basically what they're using.
Okay.
But those are also not very visible on radar, and they're very difficult to shoot down. You can use a shotgun, which can take them down. You can use certain lasers, but this is a real conundrum for the military because they really don't have significant anti-drone technology right now to stop any swarms of drone from coming over and obliterating our aircraft that are sitting out on the flight lines without protection. Same thing with Europe. They aren't in revetments. They aren't protected. Drones could obliterate our air forces on the ground. And the only thing we've got now are $1 million missiles that we can throw at these drones, and that's a
Right.
lost proposition, a losing proposition to throw $1 million at a $300 drone.
So there is a difference between the government covering up real UFOs and maybe someday fabricating something, because I've heard people, for instance, we talk about the agendas. You got Agenda 21 that turned into Agenda 2030, I think.
Yeah, 2030.
Sustainable development, satellite cities, all that stuff. And then you got Project Bluebeam, which some people said, well, who did that start with? Was that Operation Paperclip guy, the head of NASA? Maybe I'm thinking of a different guy. What was his name?
Well, Warner von Braun.
Yes. Wasn't he the one that talked a lot about Project Bluebeam, according to his assistant, who I forgot her name too, but you know what I'm talking about, Joel.
Well,
let me finish this sentence. So and I want you to talk about what you're talking about right now, because you know what I'm saying. But does the agenda change according to the up and coming generations? Does it evolve? Could COVID have been the Project Bluebeam? Anyway, what say you? Go ahead.
Well, this goes back longer, and I don't think it's changed much according to the generation, except for the fact they've become more open about admitting that UFOs do exist. But it's interesting that Admiral John Kirby came out in his statement saying, yeah, there are, he said most of these things are manned aircraft, and, that we know and track because they are not nefarious. And that's true. I mean, most of the stuff that people were seeing at night with the red and blue and green lights are aircraft following FAA things. Those are not drones and they're not UFOs, but steady lights. And I think, by the way, that the drones that were shooting out laser beams were some type of drone, either foreign or domestic, and you don't see lights on those. They're dark, except when the laser beams come off on those. I don't know who they are or what they are, and I don't think the government does, because, as I repeat, it's very, very difficult to track small drones. And they talk about car-sized drones, but most of those car-sized drones, remember, at night, how do you tell that it's the size of a car? Well, the only reason you tell that is because the lights are on the wingtips and they look big enough that you can say they're car-sized. But those are aircraft, either helicopters or aircraft drones, but those are not helicopter tilt rotor type, drones that are normally typical of those. So I don't think the agenda is changing. I just think the Operation Bluebeam is a cover story to say that the government is putting out these things to try to
Carol Rawson. That's her
waters.
name. Carol Rawson. Have you heard of her? She's the one that worked for Von Braun, but who's to say that she's not, like you said, part of that cover up?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's happening is that, it started out in New Jersey, but in fact, that was only because it was the hype in New Jersey that got everybody to start to look at the night sky, and everybody started to chime in on the hype and say, oh, I see lights in the sky. That's got to be the drones that everyone's talking about. So they started to film and put that up. But it turns out there are a lot of sightings in Chicago and the Northwest, and now it's all over the world, but they're not drones. I mean, most of these, in fact, are aircraft because they're only visible at night. And I've even seen one of the daylight ones that looks like a box kite going through the air with no means of propulsion. That's a UFO. That's not a drone. You got to have a means of propulsion visible for us to be an earthly drone. Otherwise, it's a UFO, extraterrestrial type vehicle.
What about the extraterrestrials not being nice or being a lot of people think they're demonic?
Well, there is something to that in the fact that, first of all, they don't operate on Newtonian physics. All right, drones can exceed the speed of light. They can appear and disappear. They can make right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds, which means they're defying the laws of inertia. Anything that has mass is going to go through the wall of a spacecraft, do a 90-degree turn at hypersonic speeds. You see what I mean? But when they can do that and not have any ill effects, that means they could be in the spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the spiritual realm is not bound by the temporal laws of this earth. God can move at instantaneous speeds around the universe, not at the speed of light. So can angels in terms of visiting the earth. There are means of propulsion and communication that exceed the speed of light. The spiritual in communication is not limited to the speed of light. So
we're talking about different dimensions, even possibly, or interdimensional travel. And then, like you said, they appear to be physical, but they're not. They're spiritual.
That's very possible. Satan can appear as a physical human being, and he can change his appearance at will. He's allowed certain powers to do that. And there's a group of books put out by Barry Chamish in Israel about the Nephilim, which were the giants of the old Israel time, and how they've appeared to certain people, and they will come through walls and go out through the walls. Now that means it's a spiritual being. It's not a physical being.
Right.
If you can go through walls, you're not a physical being. You're in the spiritual dimension, but they look physical. They look like you're looking at a physical until they go through the wall. So that's possible about UFOs too, except for the fact that some have actually crashed and they are made of a certain type of exotic metal. So those are not in the spiritual realm. So I don't have all the answers to those. I just know that what I think has been verified in terms of reality is that they do exist. Some may be in the spiritual realm and some may be in the physical that are not pertaining. But there's been no credible evidence that they've ever destroyed or attacked anything on Earth.
How much time do you have left, Joel?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. What else should we talk about? You pick.
Well, in the political scene, Trump is running up the same problem about, dealing with Congress full of rhinos. You have a speaker, Mike Johnson, is now just making a deal with the Democrats to pass a continuing resolution, a stopgap measure. He's giving everything away to the Democrats again, Planned Parenthood and all those types of things, pay raise to Congress up to $243,000 a year now, up, all kinds of other things that are just getting, and Trump has just put his foot down and said, if you go through with this, Mike Johnson, you're out as speaker. This is the end of the line. Now, the problem with this is if Trump does hold the line and stop this stopgap spending, there's going to be a shutdown of the government. And right now, the Biden would do the same type of shutdown that everyone's experiencing. He'll cut down the no interest in the national parks. You can't get a passport. You can't do anything. They cut essential services to make you vote and give in to the fact that let's have this resolution. They don't realize, and Trump doesn't realize because he went through the shutdown before. He did not realize you've got enough money coming to them that you can keep all the essential services right. You just have to stop shoveling out money to foreign aid
Right.
out the door. You got to stop welfare spending. You've got an excuse to stop all that stuff, not the essential services that people need, and keep the government running and just starve those people out. So a government shutdown is a good thing if you know how to do it right. But Trump does not, I'm afraid.
And they keep calling it the Trump shutdown when he hasn't been sworn in yet.
Well, they'll blame it on because he is threatening, Mike Johnson, you're not going to be speaker if you go through with this deal. And there aren't the votes, obviously, to have a deal that Trump likes or the conservatives like. There just aren't the votes, especially in the Senate. So it's a catch-22 situation. And you can't do a shutdown with Biden in charge. The only thing you could do is a shutdown once Trump, and he'll inevitably come to these things again. But I don't know how to get through to Trump that, there are ways to do a shutdown without shutting down essential services.
Maybe someday you'll get through to him. Last words. Here's what I want to ask you. Will the United States of America fully recover? People are saying that woke is dying, and another word for woke is just leftism. Is it dying? Will we recover completely economically for a while before we dump again, or will we dump again? What is the future of the United States? Will we ever see a 1980s decade again? Like the Reagan years?
We are gonna see a respite, but it'll only be based upon what Trump can do with executive orders. He's not going to be able to get anything through Congress, in my opinion. He's going to be able to do return to Mexico or remain in Mexico for these asylum things, but the courts are going to block him everywhere he can. Congress is probably not going to authorize the funding to finish the border wall, just like they did during his first administration. We will get more gas and oil. He'll unleash that, so we'll have lower gas and oil prices. He doesn't have a control over inflation because he's going to keep Jerome Powell in as chairman of the Fed. And remember, all the inflation comes through the Federal Reserve, creating new money, and they launder that new money through the Wall Street banks, so they get first use of that money to boost the stock market. That's why you have this huge stock market bubble, of which most people's pension funds are still dependent on, and they'll be held to pay if they ever pop that bubble, or if they, took control of the Fed and stopped the inflation. The only thing that's keeping the economic bubble open is inflationary spending, and that's why it's not cooling down. It's still well over 10%, and it's Fed is saying it's 3.5%. It's not. It's over 10%. It's always 3 times what the CPI says it is. In terms of the woke agenda, it's true only because of economic damage that corporations like Walmart are dismantling their DEI institutes and their.
Well, and you see Trump on the cover of Time magazine. What's going on here?
Well, they're playing up to the conservatives basically by putting their hero out, but they're planning on sabotaging him in the background. I just think we're buying a little more time with Trump. He's going to be fighting a continual battle. This will especially come out during the Senate confirmation processes of all of his people.
Well, Hollywood seems scared. They're running. Trump 47 he has nothing to lose, right?
Well, I'm not sure how afraid they are, but I can tell you the big corporations are afraid of losing customers over DEI. That's why they're backtracking on that. But DEI is not going away. People are not getting more moral. The youth of the world is still getting more contaminated in social media, and they're becoming more open to transgenderism and other things. Parents are getting more permissive about raising their children. So I don't see any silver lining in terms of the ultimate destiny of the world, just a slight respite in the fast lane that we suffered under Biden and Harris. It will slow down, but he's not going to drain the deep swamp. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't know who's deep state and who isn't. She's not going to be able to clean out the NSA as director of national security.
Yeah.
Now, Holman in DHS, he's going to be a tough guy to deal with. He is really going to do his best, but I just don't. I think the courts are going to stop the mass deportation efforts. I think we're going to see the courts, who are largely deep state controlled, really throttle the Trump administration. You're going to see the courts come after him on a multitude of things.
Yeah, I agree too. All right, here's my crossfire question for the end. Christ coming in 2033. What say you, Joel?
I think there's too much that has to happen for that. In other words, I think, first of all, we have to have a major world war to change the world out of the AI robotic direction that they're talking about, transhumanism and all this foolishness, into survival mode, and where you have a lot of destruction. Remember that the New Jerusalem area has to be completely destroyed and devoid of people before even the New Jerusalem is built, which takes a few years before the second coming can come. And then you have to have the people in the parable of the 10 virgins happening, and the church divided, so that you drive out the faithful who make it to the New Jerusalem. The main body of the church probably won't know that the New Jerusalem is being built, because they'll be in the bosom of the mainstream trying to take on the mark of the beast and the new globalist government, however that turns out. So I just see too much having to happen for it to come that soon. And I'm certainly not going to project a date, but I can tell you, I don't need to know the date. I need to know that there has to be, one, a major war. There has to be plagues that come about, which come about because of the bioweapons that they're developing. There has to be a division of the church. There has to be an establishment of the New Jerusalem. There has to be the 45th section fulfillment, where it says the New Jerusalem will be the only place on the face of the earth where people will not be at war one with another. That means there's total war. And that means civil war. And it doesn't mean, conservatives against liberal. It probably means no electricity, and you have total anarchy, and you have refugees pillaging and coming and stealing. That's the kind of war one with another. But I think even the world war starts to have internecine fighting between the major powers. And then there has to be the Battle of Armageddon in Israel, where the second coming of the Christ first appears, coming on the Mount of Olives and splitting it in two. And a few of the Jews who are worthy are saved through coming through to meet the Christ, and they don't recognize him as the Savior.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's how I view the last days coming, and I don't need to know the time. I just need to watch. One thing has to happen before the second coming, and there's a lot that still has to happen.
All right, Joel, thank you so much. God bless. And come back. Come back, please.
Good to be with you, Troy.
All right. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now.